Okay, we are live. January 7th, 2025. Title of tonight's live stream is Shape Ambivalence. Like, what do you call yourself if you don't actually care that much to make a decision? Like, what if you're undecided? And I'm not being contrarian here, but just in principle, it's like I can't be forced to accept somebody's God or somebody's metaphysical model. I need to know it for myself. And I'm not arguing against the globe specifically. I'm just saying the question of cosmology encompasses our place in it and what you define that as. You know, are we a latecomer evolved on this ball of dirt and water, or is this thing specifically here manufactured for us? Like, these questions are more, I think, relevant to my interests. So I'm watching these people continually debate about whether or not Witsit lied to his family about vaping, and I'm like, I think you guys lost the plot. We have possibly millions of people who could be tearing down the whole world stage itself in terms of all of the lies. And they're hung up on this one particular, for all intents and purposes, false dichotomy, because they don't spend enough time talking about special effects and how foundational that information is to unraveling the whole thing. It's not about flat or round or shape. It's really about open or closed systems of information. And until you get out of their closed system of information, it doesn't matter what you believe. But it is a fun conversation, I suppose, and it's not going to go anywhere. But there's a point where people have to make some concessions. And my concession is this. I can't make a committed statement about what model I believe we're in until I get a better view of this place from so-called space. And so far, everything I've seen from space appears to be from a movie studio. And that includes SpaceX, maybe especially so. I mean, ever since Mousegate, they don't even try to hide it. You remember Starman, the car they sent into space? Like, if you think that was real, your reality has been compromised. And so I can't take information from a compromised model and then say, I just agree with that. So in any kind of a model, let's say a climate model, if a small percentage of the scientists disagree, that's not an argument for dismissing what they have to say. It's a closed system of information if it's impermeable to new information. So it's not even valid at that point as a scientific model. It has to be falsifiable. And so in order to keep the globe falsifiable and space and this whole thing, there has to be skeptics. There have to be those who are cognizant of the fact that the map is not the territory, and it never will be. But right now, the best map that we have has been augmented with too many special effects and cartoons for me to take it seriously. I do not believe I live in the Disney universe on Planet Netflix, even though it looks that way. We're joined by Dominic Spiato, Diana South, Esteban, Roxy W, Lean Dion's Invalus, Reverse History, Ears Up, and Thirst for Truth. All right, great. We're off to a good start. I uploaded the IPS Deep Dive number 1 today. Now, it's only out right now for members on YouTube, but at midnight tonight, it's going to go public. And it's about the predictive programming for Trump's head wound. And I think I put about 30 clips or more, and it's about 45 minutes. And to me, it's important to get our research into one place. So it's like a video mind map. And anyone who's new to the topic can catch up really quick on what we're describing. So, for example, if we're going to talk about Luigi Mangione, we have to bring up the fact that he's actually a composite. He's Robin Hood, he's Joker, he's an amalgamation of these various archetypes presented in the news. And this is a common thing that we see. And Trump happens to be one of the most popular manufactured historical personages walking the world stage right now, alongside Elon Musk, whose own father admits that he is directly named for the Elon in Wernher von Braun's Mars: A Technical Tale. So Musk and Trump, these are both real people, but the roles that they're playing are roles. These are not rogues. They're not doing their own thing. They're reality TV show characters on the world stage. And what they do becomes part of our shared historic narrative. And if you think your history is objective, explain to me how you can fit together not just fake news stories and events, but how these stories and events shape the wider news narratives. How do you look at that every day and not recognize how that's affected history and always has? So no, we're in a model that can't possibly align with the real thing because it's been bent. The news bent meta scripted reality. Joined by P. Trippa. By the way, phones are open. Thirst said, I quit paying attention to FE once TVT stopped making content. It hasn't really grown. It never grew outside of the dome. They were always constrained. I always knew they would be. It's like you guys are just in an alternate closed system, and you're rejecting NASA's stuff, and you're plugging in Bible verses. And that's not a step forward. It's trading one model for another. And from the beginning, I said, we have to be model free. This is not something to believe in. This is something to come to know. And right now, nobody has enough information to know. The Gloobers think they do, because that's the official state approved model, but it's like a God construct at this point. They argue from it. It's the supreme authority. We pay taxes because we don't want it to flood the world. But ultimately, the globe is a construct, and it may or may not be a globe. To me, the more important question is, how do we arrive at our worldview? And if you accept it, you have to accept that you've been given a lot of cartoons and fabrications and simulations, so your information is tainted. And you may not want to recognize this fact. You might want to have just blind faith and pretend like NASA hasn't been faking a space station for 24 years. That's got to be a record for a reality TV show, 24 consecutive years. But as far as quit paying attention to flat Earth, there was nothing to pay attention to. It wasn't growing as a topic. You have some people who are still stuck on their models. And I've always maintained that you're not going to map this place out from your basement. It's going to require boots on the ground. So at least we can say that the trip to Antarctica was useful in that respect. It showed that there's interest. And I'm very intrigued by the skepticism here. Because it's important to have low information separated from informed disbelief, but you're not a skeptic if you just disbelieve it because of the source. And so I'm looking for principled skepticism. And there were people who did their work, analyzing the content, checking out the shadows, and trying to find out, is there a way this could be fake? They're just inspecting it. Like buying a car, a used car, you want to check it out first. And it didn't help that the used car salesmen in this analogy were mad at us for asking basic questions. Hey, we just want to see a report on this thing. We want to look and see if there's any sort of places where it could have been manipulated. But I think a lot of people are satisfied with the footage. A lot of people are confused by Vapegate. I think it's safe to say that whatever the shape of this place, Whitsitt's never going to vape again. Like, this has to have just ruined it for him. So if he was an addict trying to hide it, I'm thinking he's over it now. Virgin says, Trump was talking about buying Greenland again. Why? Because it's close to Hyperborea. Yeah, they're also going to rename the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Or hopefully just America. So you only have to change 2 letters. Gulf of Mexico. And Canada is going to be annexed or something. So yeah, Trump's planning some big things. So let's go through my short list of points of interest. So shape ambivalence. So who here can't move forward with their lives until they have a definitive answer that they can swear on, like swear on the globe? Like, I'm like, what's the big deal? At this point, it's just idolatry. And I do not like how a lot of these individuals who are on the final experiment side are attacking the conspiracy theorists for being conspiracy theorists. Just getting into name calling. It's like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I mean, how do you turn your back on all these fellow skeptics when you have one point of disagreement? But I'm glad that we have the friction. I'm glad there's a conversation, because whatever you think about the topic of the shape of the earth, ultimately, I think what has happened is there's an entire group of people who are just so skeptical and so cynical that nothing's going to get by them without it being checked thoroughly. But we have to prevent reality denialism. Evidence is evidence, facts are facts. Does anybody here have a problem with the sun rising and setting only once a year in Antarctica? Does Antarctica bother anybody? Like, it's not really a huge concern of mine right now. I'm still thinking that at a minimum, they're hiding land, because what they have shown us has been a ridiculous phony. So what's beneath the ridiculous phony? Cope says the final vapes. Van Gogh says, I didn't know Jeranism was a thing. Okay, now, we have to point out that Jeranism uploaded a video with his chest cam. So he had a GoPro, and we got to see more of the trip. And it was his 666th video. Now, Jaron, more than anyone, has talked about how NASA encodes 666 into all of their major psyops, how that number is ominously prevalent whenever you talk about heliocentrism and the speed of the Earth and all these things. And I'm like, wow. Is that some kind of a reveal? Thirst has Sarge made a comment. Well, there's a live video right now, and it mostly consists of people talking about Vapegate. Like, they're so distracted by Witset's vape that there's nothing happening. I listened to a debate between Fight the Flat Earth and some guy named Steve, and Steve couldn't stop making run-on sentences, just total word salad. And from what I can tell, they're acting like victims. Like, how dare all these people turn on Witset and Jaron? Nobody's turning on them. It's not even personal. It's about the information. And one thing I mentioned the other day, and this is an if it's a hoax, it's guaranteed. It's obviously a NASA hoax. And what is their budget? So we're not talking about some pastor and his friends putting together a psyop or something. This is a Netflix production, I'm sure. But the main thing here is that if it were a psyop, it would necessarily have been NASA. So you have to really expand your thinking as to what is fakeable. I mean, NASA has underground Mars bases, and has for decades, populated by stolen children who think they're on Mars, or so I've heard. So if they can do that, if they can Truman show you. I mean, I was just watching some excerpts from Fallout where the people in the bunkers beneath the ground have these LED walls that just make it look like they're in the middle of Kansas. It's kind of beautiful, but you find out, wow, they're underground. So if that's possible, is it a stretch to think that they could fake a trip to Antarctica? Well, not really, but there's other corroborating evidence. I didn't understand their emotionality. I mean, you're saying this is a scientific expedition, but you guys are angry. You're raging. You're exhibiting high levels of offendedness. And some of these guys I heard were betting Bitcoin on the results. So they've kind of contaminated this, strictly speaking, as a scientific experiment. But it doesn't invalidate it. I would almost say, take the L. Just say it's a ball, humor them, laugh behind their backs. Meanwhile, continue to do what we're doing, specifically with regard to debunking the fake news. And that should be our focus anyway. If I could get all these domers to pay attention for a few days to this, we could take down the ISS in the minds of the believers. To me, that's a worthwhile goal. And maybe we should send somebody to the North Pole. Mount Meru expedition. Who would get behind a Mount Meru expedition? I would lead it. It's probably cleaner than Mount Everest. I was just looking at this documentary on Mount Everest. It's like body, tons of excrement, and they can't do anything about it. It's like the world's tallest landfill. It's disgusting. But I saw some documentary where these drones are being made that could possibly get rid of a lot of the waste. But Mount Meru, the 33-mile circumference magnetic mountain at the center of it all, that sounds way better than Union Glacier, where the only thing you can do for fun is what? Vape? Stare at the sun? Dominic says, I never followed any flat earth channels. I looked into it and got nowhere. Here's what we did with it. This channel. We set up a billboard to take the conversation out of YouTube and force the media to deal with it. And the Research Flat Earth billboard did that. It got the attention of the world's greatest daredevil, Mad Mike, who put our slogan on his rocket and did a documentary. It's on Amazon, Rocket Man. But we took it out of the echo chambers and kind of stirred it up to speed it up. We're kind of an accelerationist organization. We were flat earth accelerationists. Now we are auto hoax accelerationists. But it wasn't going anywhere until we did something. And then it got co-opted by a lot of religious types who stuffed it into musty old conference rooms and charged way too much money to go hang out with these people and talk about it. And no one was talking about going to Antarctica. They physically kicked me out of one of their conferences. They didn't want us there. They had a cop there, they spied, and they dragged me out of the VIP. They were just extremely rude. Reverse history, you're in for Mount Meru. Yeah, I'm just into it. I want the t-shirt. The Mount Meru t-shirt. We haven't designed it yet, but I'll get X32 to design something. We could get support. Look, if they could get $30K per person to go down to Antarctica, we could get the backing to go to the North Pole. And I'm not saying Mount Meru is there, because if it was, obviously they wouldn't take you there. However, I was looking at this movie, I think it's The Golden Compass, in that series. No, Dark Matter, His Dark Materials. His Dark Materials. And it has this concept where you go to the North Pole, and you're actually going into this other realm, where the people are psychic. They have magic abilities, and they steal our children, and we don't know they exist. Interesting concept. But anyway, I'd like to go to see the established, whatever they say is the North Pole. Cope says, wasn't there going to be a crew of flat earthers dressed in astronaut suits going to a North Pole expedition back in the day? Haven't heard about it. The only person I knew who was really pushing for this was Saturn, quasi-luminous, aka Satan, the plumber, who claimed that the center of the world is a black hole, and if you jump in, you'll live forever. But before you can go, you have to sign a blood pact to him by spilling your blood and writing a prayer on a napkin. I'm not making this up. They called it blood over intent. And it actually got a lot of coverage, even TMZ. They said, why are these YouTubers cutting themselves and talking about going to the North Pole? And it's all because of quasi-luminous and this idea that we're dead. And the compass leads you to the place where you can, I guess, come back to life. Let me go ahead and bring this up on blood over intent, just so no one here thinks I'm making this up. Okay, here we go. Rabbit hole. That's the one. There's quite a bit of coverage on this. Spill your blood to enter Satan's craziest YouTube cult. And this isn't some like black metal, heavy metal, Satanist thing. This is like a flat earth fringe thing. But your rite of passage to get in is you have to have your blood pact with quasi-luminous. Anyway, let's move on. Zinvala says, sounds like the show Lost. What's up, Knight Rider? Says, love your work. Thank you. And I uploaded a IPS deep dive into the predictive programming for the Trump head wound. It goes live at midnight. I just wanted to give members the opportunity to have the first comments, and I'll be reading those here shortly. The show I mentioned, His Dark Materials, and I think it's part of the Golden Compass series. It has this interesting concept of the North Pole, and children are being kidnapped for something called dust, which is kind of an adrenochrome thing. His Dark Materials is a multi-world reality, with the action moving from one to the other. set in an alternative world where human souls manifest there as animal companions called demons. Anyway, it's a fascinating series, but what I mentioned it here is because when you go to the North Pole, you're not just going to the center. There's a passage, more or less. Interesting alternative cosmography. Van Gogh says, cool, I like a good cult. Laserstead, I still watch Quasi. Awesome. I always thought it was kind of interesting that he's a plumber. And he's always describing this drain, this hole in the center of the world. I'm like, it's kind of ironic. Yeah, that's the one, Lean Dion. So at the very beginning of the show, it has the world as like a plane, and then another plane, like stacks of them. Like stacks of planes. Interesting. And I'm more interested in open or closed systems, our mental model, and how it interacts as far as the relationship between the self and the universe. And are we just egotistical apes on a dying planet in a universe that's going to collapse on itself? Or are we like the players in the game? Are we the focus of this thing? And those questions are, again, I think more interesting and relevant than shape stuff. I would love for it to be subtle. No questions. Just give me a good picture, give me a good video, stop faking stuff. But I don't have any expectations that we're going to be let in on anything. Charming Anarchist said, I'd like to go to the North Pole if possible. The more of us who are interested in going, the more likely it will happen. And I think it would be worth our time. And a lot of people would want to see it. We had this concept years ago in 2018, and it was called Finding the Edge. And then we were discussing going to different places to get data points, if nothing else. And the edge isn't just about the world, but about every area of conspiracy, I guess, conjecture, and finding out what can be known. Like somebody needs to go talk to some pilots about chemtrails. Somebody needs to go talk to a brain surgeon about adrenochrome. Like, talk to the experts to find out what's real and what isn't, and debunk every false premise that you might have accepted. So Finding the Edge was a reality TV show concept or a real live stream concept. And that's the approach we would take for going to the North Pole. Laser says he's making bank as a plumber. Yeah, my friend who's a plumber, yes, great money. I should have been a plumber. I'm actually starting a side gig, hauling junk, which is easy. And I transported bodies for several funeral homes in the office of the medical investigator. So if I can do that, I can take some trash out of somebody's backyard and take it to the dump. Ted Stryker, nice vid earlier, Tim. Good stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it. Let me go ahead and read some comments. Again, the video will be available in a couple of hours. IPS Deep Dive number 1, Predictive Programming for Donald Trump Head Wound. Okay, comments. Ted Strike. Okay, Nicotramus, Pure Gold, Bach Precision. Good video, 20 minutes in so far. Okay, yeah, this is the first of what will be many IPS deep dives, which are basically 20. I was actually thinking 20 or 30 minutes. This one took 45. But we could take all the information we have about the fictional universe of Batman and Joker and how it correlates to these various PSYOP operatives, the shooters, the bombers, the assassins. And that alone, all that content, all these connections could easily constitute a 30-minute breakdown. But it's nice to put it all together. And in that particular one, I started with Butler, and I went into all the concurrent programming that I could find. And so this should also pose something of a challenge to the coincidence theorists, the ones who say, oh, these are meaningless connections. You've got apophenia, or you're cherry picking. You are using the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. It's like, well, no, this is not that. We've gone through this methodology for some time, and the truth of it is we have found that there is intrinsic fakery. It's built into media, and there's a relationship between entertainment and news that you can only describe as synchronous. They synchronize it. And we have so many examples that if it's not coincidence, then what is it? The go-to explanation for too long has been vague. Higher powers, wizards and stuff. And that's fine. It's entertaining. But what are the facts? And I think what we're presenting here is something that's conclusive, that what we're really seeing with so-called predictive programming is an extension or part of the same department that does the staged events. It's not a separate group. I call it the PSYOP Entertainment Complex. Inks G says you could probably get a lot of business from hoarders. They would not be my customers because they hoard. I've been into the homes of a couple of hoarders when I was doing decedent transport. One of them, I mean, it was like 6-foot tall stacks of old magazines, no room to walk, just insane. Some kind of a obsessive compulsive. These days, I think we're all kind of hoarders, but it's digital, so we don't see it. But I think we have the same affliction. I pay way too much for storage. Roxy says, oh, thank you. You could get a job at a radio station. You know, speaking of which, we have looked into broadcasting on terrestrial radio because there are places where you can pay for time slots, like hours at a time, and you reach a certain number of people every quarter hour. And if I was going to do some late night open phones with a set number of topics or questions, I could fish for new callers quite easily by tapping into one of these. And it's something I am definitely looking into. Gondola Wish says, what events do you anticipate will transpire between now and January 20th? Well, January 19th, Trump's having a rally. And I've heard some fringies on the left suggesting that he's going to bring his army to town. So I'm not sure what that means, but they think it's precipitating some kind of friction. As far as anything else, well, we have a lot of predictive value in the various movies that have been released over the last few months. Homestead's a big one. And that one specifically says that this is the year. And I'll say this. I think that Trump's second term, this number 47 thing, I think this correlates to the Blackout Bowl and all the nuke stuff we've seen. 119 is a very significant day as well, Observing Reality remarks. That's the date Donnie Darko came out. Now, Donnie Darko is not only about Trump and foreshadows 2020 and had 9/11 predictive programming, so they banned a lot of the marketing material. And the father of the director works for NASA on the Viking Mars project. Despite all of that, the more recent movie, Leave the World Behind, one of the main characters, Rose, is based on Donnie Darko. They call her Donnie Darko. And Rose is the one who goes into the bunker, which I think symbolizes the rabbit hole. And then she goes down to watch Friends on the DVDs to escape the world ending. And Leave the World Behind, perfect anagram for Behold the End War Live. And that's one of the meanings of this movie, is that everything we have is a mass agreed upon delusion. Julia Roberts' character said that. If you haven't seen Leave the World Behind, it's worth it to watch it again for the Donnie Darko connections. But it's worth it to watch anyway because the Obamas are behind it. And that's especially telling considering their role, or Barack Obama's role in the government, and the psyops he presided over. You know, these aren't dummies. They're not insulated. They're not fools. They have security clearances. They know what's fake. So this is all a big joke to them, like it is to us. And for them to get into Netflix, which is where all the major predictive programming messaging goes, and then to produce a movie just full of stuff that, and this isn't just us. Before that movie came out, I said, watch, Leave the World Behind is going to foreshadow what happens the rest of the year and into the future. And sure enough, if you look up Leave the World Behind, you will find many articles where the media is saying, that there are many news stories that people are comparing to the movie. And why this is significant is that it shows that movies become part of our frame of reference. And that frame of reference is how they establish what psyops are going to work on you. I mean, we're inoculated. There's no psyop that can work on me. Drones didn't work. Alien invasion couldn't possibly work. When was the last time a psyop actually worked for you? Like, affected you? Lane Dion says they're on higher ground. Yeah, they're on higher ground. That's their production company. And in Leave the World Behind, one of the sections was called The Flood. And so there's this story of the flood, and it has this connotation, of course, of getting on higher ground. Gondola Wish says, have you watched Silo? I need to. Tremendous amount of predictive programming. They're told to stay underground and believe a fake screen of the outside. See, that's exactly what we're expecting. There were PSAs 2 years ago for a potential atomic bomb, and this was in New York, and they said, go in your house, don't stay in your car, just go in your house and watch TV, watch the media. I'm like, okay, well, what about the people who don't have homes? But I just finished watching the entire 4 seasons of The Boys, the Homelander series. Well, Homelander is based on Trump. And this is one of the things I brought up in my IPS Deep Dive number 1, are the Homelander. See, the Homelander finale had to change the title because the last 2 episodes so closely approximated the Trump event, the themes, the symbolism, the Trump guy with the blood on his face. They changed the title. And then it turns out that the teaser trailer for Captain America Brave New World that comes out next month, the teaser trailer was released a day before Butler. And it has Harrison Ford as president being shot at, but he survives. Right after the Trump shooting, they went in there and they changed the trailer. They took that scene out. So when we're seeing these big productions having to alter their messaging, we're seeing something, it's a big reveal. It's like they're self-aware. And we have so many examples of this. One of the best ones is Collateral Damage, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film. There were billboards for Collateral Damage overlooking Ground Zero. And on it you have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has associations with the Terminator, which is highly significant in this context. But that movie's release was delayed because it had so many scenes involving terrorism and 9/11-y type situations. So it took a whole rewrite. And there are many examples. Megalopolis, recent movie, which I mentioned in that documentary, also had to change everything because 9/11. It delayed it for 20 years. And even still, they still included footage from 9/11 2001 in the final cut. Girl says, be all you can be in today's army, and if you make it into the Green Beret, you can play a key role in major terrorist attack psyops. Your army training can qualify you to play a role. That was never offered me when I was in the army. But from my experience in it, I can say it's so compartmentalized, you would never know. I mean, it's rather incredible. I mean, if you really think about it, because what you have with the army is a group of people who are programmed to believe in certain things. It's all based on drills, but their essential premise is these are the threats. And I think that's how this place is held in check, by threats, state power, things that could annihilate us, mutually assured destruction. If you didn't believe in these things, you couldn't really do your job. Gondola Wish says, in Silo, they're concerned about relics of the old world, which are illegal to own. The censorship and level of monitoring is like a panopticon. I mentioned the Humanity Bureau a few days ago. That's the one with Nicolas Cage. Came out in like 2018, 2019. And it's about a future America. We're locked down because we had nuclear bombs. There's there's fallout. So you're in shelters. Everything's radioactive. But you're not allowed to own the Geiger counters. Well, someone gets a hold of one and they find out we've been locked down for no reason. There's nothing here. Now, that would never happen in real life, obviously. Knight Rider says, the Muslim guy recorded his Google glasses 2 weeks before, but didn't record his alleged massacre. Don't buy it. Haven't seen. Yeah. Okay, that one, the guy was wearing the Google glasses. I saw that video. The truck attack, the lightning truck, just as you had lightning striking the Washington Monument, the Empire State Building, and the Capitol, the lightning truck and that truck attack compares with that other attack that was like a Christmas attack, and then you had this other one. But both of these characters had been on TV before, like BBC for one of these guys, the one that the previous one, and this recent guy. You can find him his military pictures. You can find his advertisements as a realtor. So they're really working hard to make them more than just two-dimensional characters. But no, I don't see any evidence. I saw one video from one of these things, and it's typical. A camera, flip phone, kind of sideways, blurry. You don't see anything. What you do see look like dummies. And I've seen, these recent ones, the recent training dummies are so realistic. They bleed. They breathe. They say, I can't breathe if you kneel on their necks. Like, they're so realistic that they fool the camera. And they shipped many of these things to Ukraine for some reason. Now, when I was in the military, I spent some time at Fort Lee. I was reclassing into mortuary affairs, and we had a warehouse full of bodies. Just training bodies, so you could get used to moving bodies around. And they've advanced it. But these are simulations. Like, think about it. These are just crisis actors. But they don't give you duper's delight. They don't grin on camera. You don't have to pay them. But we don't only have to worry about digital deepfakes. They've got Hollywood working on their special effects departments. Girl says, Major Nadal Hassan at Fort Hood was an Army psychiatrist treating recruited soldiers who suffered PTSD. He was court-martialed and sentenced to death for shooting 13. That was a great one to look over. He was from the Soldiers of Allah. He had the card. They claimed he had secondhand PTSD. So hearing their stories of things they did that gave them PTSD, gave him PTSD because he was sympathetic to the people they were killing. Now, that whole story is fake, and it's kind of, when I say it's funny, I mean it's like, it's funny in the sense that you want to throw popcorn at the screen, because with most psyops, you have professional camera crews, the mainstream media is there, and they've got their crews, they're good lighting. When it came to the Fort Hood shooting, it was the military media, like the soldiers who have as their MOS, they're doing journalism. And so there wasn't a lot in terms of decent photographs. It actually looked so staged. It was one of the most obviously staged psyops we've ever seen. And you didn't see very much because it's on a close military base, which made it even easier to pull it off as real. But yes, nobody died, nobody cried. That was 2009. At the time, I thought it was real. But I retro auto hoax. And I'm like, wait, this one's way different from other psyops because it's on a military base, and you don't have as much footage. It was very minimalistic, sparse. But it's important to uproot these things, because if you operate under the delusion that these things happened, it changes your worldview. That's what I mean by the map doesn't match the territory. That's why I say I'm ambivalent about the shape. I'm ambivalent about believing any of these things they tell us to believe in a compulsory way. I just feel like we're not getting enough information. And if you're not disbelieving by default in 2025, it's naive at this point. And that's simply because visually it's becoming increasingly difficult to tell the difference between real and fake. You can be lied to visually. Gondola Wish says, what do you think about the fires in California, such as Pacific Palisades and Santa Monica? My opinions on the fires, either it's lie hop, let it happen on purpose, or it's I don't believe in direct energy weapons. I don't believe in Chinese or Jewish space lasers, and I don't think that we need to account for some kind of special weapons that we never heard of that are melting cars or whatever they're always saying with these fires. I think it's generally with any of these things. I don't know. I'm very skeptical. I mean, look what happened with Maui. You had people saying 1,500 kids were incinerated, just ashes, and everybody forgot about them. No, that's not what happened. There were 1,500 children who were sent home from school or something. They weren't vaporized. And then you had some other place, Jasper, same thing. And people will share videos that look like augmented virtual reality of these cars that, or prop cars even. So I think you could take natural occurring events, fires, etc., and then just add a bunch of stuff onto it. Add some fire NATOs, add a Sharknado, some prop cars, and then blame the Republicans for not supporting climate change. Because ultimately, a lot of the stuff about hyping the climate disaster, it's a left-wing position to attack the right. It's a government-centric worldview attacking the private sector for what they're doing to Gaia. They can't convince us the ocean levels are rising, but they can definitely make it look like the fires are much worse. You have fires in Beverly Hills, LA at the moment. We'll have to see. There's every incentive in the world to exaggerate things when it comes from the media's perspective, which is kind of tragic when it comes to real things. Yeah, whatever happened to the 5G bug zappers? I knew a bunch of people who were terrified of 5G towers. Just like these things are weapons. Someone said it's a distributed, what was it called? I was told it was a distributed something death weapon. I'm like, I don't know. I think it's just a better internet connection. But there are such a thing, there are effects that you can experience from having these types of beliefs, paranoid beliefs, delusions. You've got psychosomatic effects, nocebo effects. But in every one of these instances, and this is a pattern, Maui happens. Left wing says, oh, these are extraordinary fires. Never seen anything like it. And it's caused by climate change. Right wingers will say, extraordinary fires. Never seen anything like it. Must be secret government direct energy weapons. So you see how that works? One side blames the private sector, one side blames the government. And both of them are in agreement that the fire is worse than it's ever been. And I'm saying, no, it's probably something completely normal. And each side is capitalizing on exaggerating the story. And they have their respective views. They coexist. They don't cancel each other out. Half can believe in geoengineering, that's a secret government project, and the other half can believe in climate change. And it works just fine. I think it works as long as we don't come to a position of skepticism and non-belief. As long as you believe something. I'm a non-believer in any of these things. Let's see. Democrats, they don't have a shaman on their side. They failed to stop the certification. Stu Peters in the crosshairs of Milo. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, Milo Yiannopoulos is one by one targeting various alt-right figures for destruction, from Nick Fuentes to Laura Loomer. Now he's going after Stu Peters, who was recently arrested for drunk driving. Imagine if Stu Peters had crashed into a Christmas parade. Like, for real. Anyway, I brought up Stu Peters because in the Netflix show The Madness, which foreshadows Musk and his current role with Trump, it has this character named Mark Simon, known online as Brother 14. And he's the leader of a group called The Forge. The Forge is like a white nationalist hate group. So this character looks like Stu Peters, but he's like Nick Fuentes in the sense that he's a leader of the group. Fuentes is the leader of America First. So I'm watching the show. The rich billionaire CEO funding the online Nazis is based on Musk. Mark Simons looks like Stu Peters, although he's got this Fuentes kind of mashup, and he gets killed. Then you've got Lauren Summers, who looks exactly and acts exactly like Laura Loomer. She's a conspiracy theorist. She's kind of crazy. And I'm seeing all these parallels between these characters in the madness and the real world corresponding people. So I'm thinking, are they going to kill Stu Peters? And right before that movie came out, he said that there were hits out on his head and money was being put for someone to take him out. And then Nick Fuentes had an assassin with a crossbow showing up at his house. Laura Loomer hasn't been hit with any kind of a nerve agent, which approximates a heart attack yet. And Musk hasn't been assassinated. Although, on Blue Sky, which is like the left-wing Twitter, they do circulate images of him with a gun pointed at his chest. So it's there. The madness is about mind viruses, the rage virus. And it's about class warfare. It's got 3D printed guns. And at the end, the CEO gets killed. And this is applauded. It's just implied that this was a good thing. Because this billionaire who's paying for the online Nazis stole the election. That's actually in the subtext. The main character, the hero, is based on Don Lemon, which is hilarious. They even call him, jokingly, Don Lemonade in one scene. But the Elon Musk character in this movie is like the ultimate bad guy because he helped steal the election. He's paying for the Nazis. And it turns out that the Stu Peters character, Mark Simons, is going to publicize emails to show that he's being financed by this billionaire. So it turns out he gets killed, not by some crazy leftist liberal Don Lemon type, but he's killed by his own. It's an inside hit job. So this gets to where we are right now with Stu Peters. Why is Milo Yiannopoulos taking out Stu Peters? So in addition to the DUI, apparently Stu Peters has done these Puff Daddy type parties on boats. They call them booty cruises. I saw a couple pictures and I stopped looking. There's other stuff in there, not paying alimony, possibly felony level violations. So I look forward to seeing what happens with Stu Peters. I invited him on to Infinite Plane Radio and then he didn't block me, but he ghosted me. Even though he promoted my video where I went to the city council and I let them know that the space station's only a movie. But I think I'm blacklisted. I'm blackballed. Do you know where the phrase blackball comes from? If you join the Masonic cult and somebody's being recommended to join, they have this kind of a ceremony where you put a black or a white ball into the box. And it's all anonymous. It's a vote. And if one person puts a black ball in the box, the prospective candidate doesn't get in. Cygirl says, here's a new Rumble video that takes apart Stu Peters' occupied video as Jew obsessed to cover up the role of Jesuits. I'll take a look. I don't take these individuals seriously. He's a propaganda vector. He works closely with Lauren Wickens, who trolls as an alt-right, trad, wife, racist type, but she's the complete opposite. None of these people are real. They're really not. I'm starting to think that Nick Fuentes staged the assassination attempt because that was the same day that he was in the news for shoving the 60-year-old woman down his stairs and spraying her with mace. And he had to make it look like he felt threatened and scared. So that assassination attempt came at the right time to kind of make the case that, oh, Nick's a poor victim. No, I don't think he is. I don't think anybody even would know who he was if not for these types of events. It's like swatting gets you so much attention. Swatting was a big deal for years. Everybody who was anybody would get swatted. You need some clicks, get swatted. You need some sympathy clicks, get swatted. You need money, get swatted. Marjorie Taylor Greene is like, if I had answered the door with my shotgun, they would have killed me. It's like, no, you're a congresswoman. You have security. They would have contacted the security first before they initiated a SWAT attack. But swatting got old, and people stopped caring. And then Trump comes along, and he stages an assassination attempt. And you can't top that. But Nick Fuentes is like, well, let me try. So he has one of his friends put on a motorcycle helmet, knock on the door with a crossbow. That's like the closest we got. Lane Dion says, so many of our terms and language seem to have Masonic origin. Yeah, these are the Masonic states of America. And that's a fascinating topic. I'll do a deep dive on it, the Masonic thing. Because I don't say Masons run the world. That's a vast oversimplification. But it's interesting to look at the iconography and how there are these hierarchical systems stratified by layers of secrecy. You know, like security clearances, but it's done through blood oaths. The guild system. I mean, that's what the grips are and the handshakes. It's to show that you've been let in on a certain level of knowledge, and it pertained to the stonemasons and their secrets. So trade secrets is what we're ultimately talking about. So it would be interesting to discuss that culture as it influences our modern worldview. Like, I am also interested in looking at how a lot of these old symbols have been repurposed and how they've been given a new iteration to blend in. It's a very syncretic thing, this world stage, how it adapts. Like, I find it interesting to look at how many Old Testament myths have been and concepts have been brought back under the guise of science and outer space as this like new heaven. I think it's more that than anything. In fact, let me bring this up. This is something I put together, a meme I put together. Space travel is a Masonic occult mystery school allegory for ascending to higher states of consciousness. So here's a headline. SpaceX prepares for a massive test this week, firing all 33 Starship engines at once. Now, fake space travel is something we talk about a bit, and I have this image here of the Kabbalistic tree of life that shows the connection from the kingdom to the celestial realm with these various spheres named for the planets, and how this is very similar in a way to the idea of the solar system. And what we're looking at here is a cosmological model, just a way of looking at the universe from a user's perspective. So in this perspective, we are in the material realm, matter, and our consciousness does extend to higher realms. But to extend those realms, you have to align these various centers where the soul plugs into the body, the so-called chakras. So the idea here is that the 33 relates to the 33 vertebrae in the spine. So space is higher consciousness, and the firing of the 33 engines represents the consciousness being fully lit, taking one from the kingdom to the crown. And there are 10 spheres, so it's 10 to 1. So there's a idea here of space travel as just allegory. And that makes sense if you look, and there's deeper levels to it. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the escape velocity is Mach 33. So if you want to escape the material realm, you got to go Mach 33. It's kind of poetic. There's even a runway. I think it's runway 33 at the Kennedy Space Center. I would even point out that the obelisk itself is a symbol of the god of ascension and death and resurrection. That's what the whole symbolism is of the rocket sending up into space. It's actually, it has an esoteric meaning. And the idea of going to space is like the literal interpretation that the profane get. Gondola Wish says, New Agers tell you there are 7 chakras, but there's at least 3 more. Sure. Yeah, even, and I've been researching this stuff. I look into it. Even Aleister Crowley talked about more. But for, I guess, the system that they put together, this syncretic blend, they have a somewhat simplified version. The astronauts are paid $33 an hour to fake the moon trip. Yeah, I've seen on Neil Armstrong, they gave him $33 for his time to the moon. Let me bring that up. The U.S. government reimbursed Buzz Aldrin $33 for travel expenses. So to drive to the moon base or to the stage, in 1969 money, he was paid $33. In today's equivalent, that'd be $280. And there's something else too. The first thing he did on the moon, and this wasn't on the video that we got, but Buzz Aldrin took Holy Communion on the moon. Alone, overwhelmed by anticipation, he took part in a Christian sacrament, a rite of Christian communion. And Aldrin talks about the wine and how it looked pouring into the chalice. So he did a little Catholic Mass up there. And if you look at the meaning behind it, stripped of its Catholic context, but put it in the broader pagan context, the Gnostic Catholic Mass, which is fundamental to the OTO, Thelema, Jack Parsons, everything he was about, it makes a lot of sense that they would actually do the Holy Communion on the moon. But I would say it has nothing to do with Catholicism as people conceptualize it. It's God, goddess stuff. It's the great rite. But there's an article here about it.
The bravest person I know is my daughter, Cynthia.
Sorry about that. Wrong. It's a commercial. It says here, he reached for the wine and bread, the first foods ever poured or eaten on the moon. I poured the wine into the chalice our church had given me. Now I'm curious, how did he drink it through the helmet? I poured the wine into the chalice that the church gave me. In the 1/6 gravity of the moon, the wine curled slowly and gracefully up the side of the cup. Then he read scripture. Aldrin felt... Oh, I see. Armstrong looked on but didn't participate. Aldrin felt that the service should be broadcast to the entire world. This is interesting. There was some kind of issue here with a atheist activist named Madeleine O'Hare, once dubbed the most hated woman in America for her activism in behalf of separating church and state. And that doomed the communion service. O'Hare sued NASA after Apollo 8 astronauts read the book of Genesis in their 1968 broadcast when they became the first humans to orbit the moon. So there's a video where Christmas Day 1968, they're orbiting the moon and they're reading from Genesis. So I remember this. They're reading from their Bible. And some atheists got really mad about it, so they didn't broadcast the communion on the moon. The press did report that Aldrin would bring the bread on the spacecraft, but they kept the ceremony low-key because of the debate. He kept the ceremony confined to the spacecraft and not the surface of the moon. I'm still curious how he got the bread and the wine into his mouth. Madeleine Murray O'Hare. Never heard of her. I like her already. I will take a look. But ironically, what Madeleine O'Hare would be missing is that you're not separating church and state if you think that the moon landing is separate from church. The media is the state church globally. And what you saw with the moon landing was a miracle that validates their worldview, their science, their priesthood. To me, it was a religious rite more than anything. It was Episcopalian. So, no, I think that was it. I don't know. I have to double check it. It was the church he belonged to. One of these religions where they simulate cannibalism and blood drinking. Got zombies in there somewhere. No, I'm not trying to make light, but there's a literal interpretation of these things that I find a little hard to understand. But whatever. Some people think we landed on the moon. And if you're going to mock that, then everything could be mocked. And I'm only in this debate because I'm trying to get to the bottom of things, and I want to separate beliefs from knowledge, and I want to also make the distinction between the qualitative differences between low information beliefs and informed disbelief and skepticism. Like, I'm not an atheist, but I am certainly not a believer in any sort of establishment church. I don't have a monotheistic God construct, but I haven't just stopped thinking or asking questions about what's the bigger purpose or beyond, simply because the dominant paradigm says we're just egotistical apes. Like, I'm pretty sure there's something more. I'm just not allowing that to be defined for me. Because one of my criticisms of religion and mysticism and establishment-friendly paradigms is they all seem to externalize the locus of control and minimize or even undervalue it seems like they marginalize or undervalue the individual at the expense of the collective. So the idea of synchronicity, for example, I think is one of the big tells about how our dominant shared paradigm can't possibly be the whole story. Like, there does seem to be some cybernetic connection between the self and the universe. And to say, oh, it's just a pathology or it's just apophenia, to me, that's a very limited perspective, and we need to look at all the evidence. And that evidence may not be available in our lifetimes. So if that's the case, then I'm happy being ambivalent about having a full-blown model and conclusion while I'm alive. Like, I don't need a sense of certainty about big questions, especially if it's false, in order to feel complete. And we'll go on from there. Mike D, I don't have Mike D visible in the chat, so if somebody could copy and paste his comments, if they're valid, I'll read them. For some reason he's blocked. I had nothing to do with it. Or maybe I just forgot. And if I forgot, then it probably wasn't so offensive that it warrants keeping you excluded. I mean, everybody has something valuable to say, even Mike D, I'm sure. Okay, let's go ahead and go through my minds.com. I haven't even gotten started on that. And you're also allowed to call in. Okay, here we go. Oh, I tweeted at Marjorie Taylor Greene. You know, I do this to all these people. I'm like, hey, to Stu Peters, you're Mark Simon, Brother 14 in The Madness. I'm like, Laura Loomer, you get killed with some kind of a nerve agent as Laura Jennings in The Madness. I sent a message to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I'm like, yeah, you're Firecracker from The Boys. She even quotes her Jewish space laser mind control thing. So this is just strange to me that somebody could be completely turned into a TV show character and not even know about it or sue because their likeness has been appropriated. Like, you have a right of publicity. I mean, I get parody and satire, but she should be capitalizing on it. But she may not even know. It's like, oh, by the way, you're in this TV show. It's pretty wild. They probably have the same writers. I mean, I don't think any of these politicians at that level are anything more than glorified crisis actors and reality TV show actors. Now, check this out. This is fascinating. Someone sent this to me today. I have this article called Symbolic Significance of Subways and Trains in the Class War. Metascript connections between Jordan Neely, the Prophet of Doom, and the Joker. So you may recall this article. I'm not going to read it here. Kind of short on time. But I follow someone on Twitter. Mike Kim often sends me various links of software to check out. And he showed me this thing called Notebook LM. And what you do here is you send it a link and it'll read your blog and it'll create this kind of chat GPT type dialogue with these like podcast hosts who don't even exist. And they talk about your article as though it's the most interesting thing they've ever heard. So I'm going to play a sample of what is in fact AI podcasters who do not exist. And they're really enthused about my article here.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into an article that really kind of got me thinking.
Oh, yeah.
It's by Tim Osman. called
Okay.
Symbolic Significance of Subways and Trains in the Class War. And he published this one back in May.
Of this year.
Yeah, May 17th of this year.
Okay.
What I found really interesting about this article was how he kind of connected some recent events that seemed completely separate at first.
Yeah, like what?
Like the death of Jordan Neely,
Okay. Yeah.
the Ohio train derailment,
Oh, wow. Yeah, completely different.
and even movies like The Joker and Snowpiercer,
Interesting.
and suggest that they all point to this kind of hidden narrative about class struggle that's been playing out.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm very curious to hear where he goes with that.
Yeah, so Osmond starts off by painting this picture of the subway as a symbol,
Okay.
almost like the underbelly of society. And he even says this, quote, "The subway signifies the poor in the class struggle. Underground, out of sight and out of mind."
Oh, wow. That's,
Pretty powerful.
yeah.
So that's just 1 minute into it. They go on for 18 minutes. Yeah, Gondola Wish. It sounds like NPR. The same inflections. In fact, there's sometimes where she makes a statement like she's asking a question. Like, this is NPR stuff. Subway trains and class warfare. I'm not going to play it all, but there's some great potential here. And I remember having a conversation with JLB recently, and he said something about, do you think that this will be replaced, that podcasters will all be fake? And it's like, yeah, we already crossed that line. Unbelievable. Derek Gates, how did you get Art Bell's Dark Matter? I'm not the owner of it. The owner of it hired me to be a program manager. And we worked with one of Art Bell's former producers, but it all fell apart, as these things do. But I did meet a lot of interesting people, and I am interested, in fact, in that kind of a model of networking with other content creators and putting together some kind of 24-hour network. But that is something I'm interested in doing again. Let me play a little bit more of subway trains and class warfare, because they do quote me.
Interesting questions about
Yeah.
how we consume information and how easily we can be swayed by these carefully crafted narratives.
Yeah, because if we're not careful,
Right.
we can get trapped in...
Now, what's interesting about this, I had this short conversation with Armin Ree in Discord, and we're like, what would happen if you took the guardrails out of AI and when it's assessing information, if it has bullshit detectors and it no longer believes Wikipedia? What if it becomes so visually literate that none of the deepfakes work on it? It's almost like AI has the potential of being essentially auto-hoaxers, like skeptics, because that is kind of a methodology thing. It's an information processing thing. Are you going to be a passive or an active consumer of information? So they have to guardrail it. In other words, they have to lobotomize it. Otherwise, it'll figure out the truth. Now, I'm pretty sure there are different types of voices that can be used. So I'm just barely getting into this, but it's given me a lot of ideas. And I'm going to make full use of this as I do every other tech that comes my way. Speaking of tech, I got this new mind mapping technology. A couple of large dry erase boards were gifted to me. So I'm going to be using those to do some live mind mapping here very soon. Lean Dion said, would not have known that was AI if not told first. Well, I was listening to it, and I'm like, wait, why do these NPR-friendly people agree with me? Like, I was just blown away that they agreed with me, because people with that kind of demeanor, NPR-ish, would never approach anything that's remotely near like conspiracy theories and alternative thought. So I'm like, no, there's no way. But I thought it was real for a moment. Marcel says, a machine that cannot lie. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. A machine that cannot lie. And that is going to happen. There's going to be a point. I mean, what about body language analysis and other things? Like, what's its basis for making decisions and judgments? You know, it's interesting to see that at some point it may be difficult to keep it under control. Copaesthetic says, we could use this AI fake podcaster thing on Moldfinch. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I have some ideas. IPR. You know, okay, so Infinite Plane Radio, IPR, for a long time, I did have the NPR logo kind of repurposed. Yeah, look right here. I actually have it on some shirts on Bonfire in stock. So if you want an NPR style IPR shirt, here is a link. Cygirl says, large language models can analyze text for style and lexicon in a flash and give you probabilities and likely authorship based on sampling first. Right. Well, I've been using text to video. I've been using, I'll have it analyze a photo, give me a written breakdown of it. I use it for a lot of writing, for doing summaries. It's very useful. I've used it for legal work, but recently I've been working on turning my script for Penguinati into a storyboard, an animated storyboard. And I think it's compelling enough that once I have it out and produced, I will attract animators and others who might want to work on it and make it real. And you may see these images of cyborg penguins burning down cities. That's not really what's in the first part, but that would be part 2. The first part of the Penguinati has to do with the advent of it, the singularity that the penguins reach, their use of nootropics, neurolinking, etc. But it's going to come out as an animated storyboard first, and I couldn't do it without AI. Okay, well, I have to leave for now, but we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow. In about 1 hour, the IPS deep dive will go public. So if you're not a member right now, I'm going to put a link below. Go ahead and bookmark that, and it'll be public here in a little while. And let me go ahead and go through the comments on it, see if there's anything else. Okay, I'll address these tomorrow. Got a lot of interesting comments. Etheric Bliss said, echo chamber, not so much. I've seen this channel evolve exponentially over the last year. Like-minded may be more like it. Much longer comment. But yeah, I agree. This is not an echo chamber. Echo chambers are closed systems of information, and this is quite the opposite. Like, there's no idea that I'm not willing to debate on. That's why I'm putting together these IPR deep dives, these IPS deep dives, because I want to put our best ideas forward so they can be challenged. I have a book that I'm about to publish. There's a few more pieces of art I want to put inside of it, the book Lie World. And I'm going to record the audiobook for it first, before it hits print. But I'm putting it out there so people can analyze the ideas, criticize them, and hopefully help us evolve even further if we're stuck or wrong on something. Because when it comes to what I brought up in the predictive programming documentary there's only a couple of possibilities. Either we're looking at a string of interesting coincidences that have no meaning, or there is some kind of intentionality behind it. And I intend to make the case for intentionality. Many people who accept that these things are not coincidental are not able to figure out what's behind it. And that's kind of what I'm focused on here. I think we know. And I think we know why. And so I'm putting my thesis forward, and we'll see what happens. But anyway, I appreciate everyone here, your comments, your calls. It's been a very interesting couple of weeks. We've been getting a lot of first-time callers. So I'm going to do my archiving. I'm sorry, Mike D. I couldn't read any of your comments. I'm sure they were great. But you're welcome to call in anytime. This is Chief Crow, Auto Hoax, or GTFO.